morning, good afternoon, or good day. My name is Colin Tondu, and I'm going to do the April examination conduct by class. And first of all, I just want to welcome everyone to Numeracy in Mathematics 2. I'm your tutor for NM22, and I will mark your examination for this subject during April and May. I wish you all to be hardworking, dedicated, and self-driven student by doing your examination preparation in advance. It is very important that you prepare in advance. You don't come prepare a few days or a week before you write the examination, but it is very important that you start with your preparation already in advance. In this presentation, I will not go into details of what is asked in the question paper, but I will just give you a focus on, I will just focus on general guidelines that I want everyone to keep in mind when writing the examination. And then I will also give some examples of the type of questions that you can expect in the examination by explaining also how we want you to answer these questions. Now, the subject overview, the very first thing I will talk about is that a student should use information from graph to teach tables and vice versa. In other words, you have been given a graph and you use that information to answer or to draw a table, or you have been given a table and you must draw a graph. So you can also be asked a lot of questions on these graphs and so on. The next thing I will talk about is the use of standards and expanded notation to explain place and digit value. Then I will also discuss a bit on descending and ascending order, and then also the nth term issue. Decimal fractions and fractions, or how to convert a fraction to a decimal fraction, or a decimal number to a fraction. Those are also the things that I will talk about. And addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication of money. Very, very important that you should know how to subtract, how to divide, and so on. And also how to calculate money, things like profit and loss, and so on. We're going to talk also about the conversion of time, days, hours, minutes, and seconds, solving word problems. And then I will also explain a little bit on the clock and analog and the issue of writing from analog to the clock form, or drawing a clock from an analog, and so on. And then properties of shapes. Now let's start with the first one. Let's say you have this table. Now this table is the activity after schools for learners. For example, after school you have a couple of learners, they go home. When they reach home, what is it that our learners are involved to or involved into? So the first graph, the first column there is showing that around 7 learners are involved in TV. Maybe they are watching movies. Around 3 are doing homework. The others are doing sports. The others are sleeping. Others are playing with friends, and some are visiting family. That's what the graph is giving you. Now let's look at the type of questions that can come up in the examination to this type of graphs. So we can say, look at the graph below and construct 2 questions. In other words, you look at this graph, and then you have to ask if you are teaching this graph to your learners, you have to ask 2 questions to your class. What type of questions are you going to ask? Now, the very first thing that I want you to take note of is that when you are constructing questions on whether it's a table or whether it is a graph, you must make sure that the answer that the learner have to give must be on that table or on that graph, or from that table or from that graph. Don't ask a question and the answer to that question is, somewhere else. They have to go and think and look somewhere else for the answer. The answer must be on the graph. So in other words, they must either calculate something or look for something on the graph or on the table for them to be able to answer those questions. So for example, if you ask a simple questions like, how many learners are involved in watching TV and playing with friends? So now the learner will go now to the graph and look at TV, and then they will look at playing with friends, and they see that on TV there are 7 and playing with friends there are 5. So they add 5 plus 7 and they get an answer of 13. So that's a simple question, for example, that you can ask on the graph. And then you can ask also, sometimes they want you to you can ask, what is the most what is the highest activity that most learners are involved in? For example, in this one, most of them are playing sport. Or you can ask which is the least that they are involved in. And then you can say sleeping. But if you ask a question, for example, what is the least activity that learners are involved in and why, for example? Now you are expecting the learners to answer, for example, the answer will be sleeping, but then if you ask why, now the learner will now start wondering, why do few learners go to sleep after school? So the answer can be very vague, and any answer that they give you will be correct, because some will say no, they feel tired. Some of them they will say no, it is late in the afternoon and they sleep, and so on. So the answers can vary from one answer to the other. Now let's look at this. This one is now the table. The other one was a graph. But before we come to that one, there was another question also. Draw a table from the information from the graph. In other words, this information that you have here, you need to draw a table. So this is how you draw a table. You can just simply draw your table there, and then you have your rows there, and then this table you can divide it in two. For example, you can divide it in lines like this. So here on top here you can have after school activity, which is now your heading, after school activity. And here you have, for example, TV, you have homework. And here you have, for example, sport, and you have sleeping, and so on and so on. Now after that you need to put the values in now. How many are watching TV? And then you go to the graph and you see that on TV there are 7 learners who are watching TV after school. Those who are doing homework, there are 3. Those who are doing sports, there are 8. And those who are sleeping, there are, for example, 3, and so on and so on, and you can continue. So this is the type of information that they're looking for. Very important is that you have to have the heading, and then you have to, in your table, you have to divide the values. For example, if you put your activities there, and then you put the number of learners there. That is very important. And then, now sometimes they give you the table, and then you must draw the graph, or you must answer questions on that table. Now let's look at this scenario here. This is a 3-month rainfall for Windhoek in 2017. In other words, January, February, March. We want to know how much rain did we record it in Windhoek, for example. Now here they give you in January, they say it was only 25%. February was 50%. But in March it was only 200 milliliters. So now the questions come here is that we want to find out now, in terms of milliliters for January and February, how much was it? And in terms of percentage for March, how much was it? So should this be the total rainfall? What is the percentage rainfall in March? Now they want to know what is the rainfall in March in terms of percentage. So what do? What you do is you are having 25% for January. You add 50% for February, and then you add 200 milliliter for March, and that should be equal to 100%. So now we don't know what is the percentage in terms of the rainfall. We want to know the percentage for March. We have the percentage for January, we have for February, and we have the final percentage. So what you do is you add these 2 percentages together, you get 75% plus 200 milliliter is equal to 100%. And then from there you can take your percentage to the other side, then you have 200 milliliters is equal to 100% minus 75%. So your 200 milliliter will be equal to 25%, because you subtract 100 minus 75, you get 25. So that means that your percentage for March was 25. meaning that January was 25, February was 50, March was 25, and that gives you 100% for the 3 months. Now, number 2 is saying calculate the rainfall in January and February in milliliters. Now, for me to calculate the rainfall in milliliter, I have percentages there. The January one was 25%. Either I can assume, because you know that in March was 25%, it was 200 milliliters. That means that also for January it is 200 milliliters. So January is 200 milliliters. Why? Because in March it was 25% and it was also 200 milliliters. So that means that for January and March it is the same amount in terms of percentage and in terms of milliliters. But then if you want to find out for February, which is 50%, it's very simple. You know that 25%, you can say, for example, 25% plus 25% gives you 50%, right? So, and if we are saying that 25% is 200 milliliters, and another 25 is 200 milliliters, then a 50% will be, a 50% of rainfall will be 400 milliliters. And that will be your answer. So in other words, for January in milliliters, we have 200. February for milliliters, we have 400. And in March is 200. So that's the answer for number 2. What is the total rainfall for the 3 months? So you have to add all 3 of them. In other words, you have 25. No, you have 200 plus 400 plus 200. And that will give you your total for the rainfall for the year. Now, let's talk a bit about standard and expanded notation. Sometimes they ask you to multiply numbers. For example, they want you to multiply 32 times 24 in an expanded notation. In other words, you want you to expand the whole calculation. So when you look at that, you see that 2 times 2, you start with 4. You say 4 times 2, and that is 8. 4 times 3, it gives you 12. But then you can see how they do the expansion. They say 2 times 2, that is your 8. And 4 times 3 is 120. And 20 times 2 is 40. And 600 600 is actually equal to 20 times 30. And that is your expanded notion part, where we want you to show, because when you are teaching your learners, you have to expand these numbers and so that we can see how did you get the 600, for example, or how did you get the 40, for example. And that is how you do the expansion. Let's look at this other example. Here, this one, you are having 469 multiplied by 32. So number 1, you take 3 times 9, which is 27. You carry the 2 over, and we know that the issue of carrying over. And then this 3 times 6 is equal to 18 plus the carried over 2, the one that you already carried, and gives you 20. And then you carry the 2 to the other side on top of the 4. And then you say 2 times 4, 3 times 4, it gives you 12. Plus the other 2 carried over 2, which means it gives you 14. So at the end of the day, you're going to have 14,070 as your final answer. But in terms of the expanded notation, we want to see this blue part here. That is the section that we want to see, because that's the section that explains to us how did you do your multiplication. Now addition, when you come to addition, it's almost similar. It's 353 plus 268 is equal to 621, but the 653, you can expand it in terms of 300 plus 50 plus 3. And the 268, you can expand it as 200 plus 60 plus 8. Now, you can add all the hundreds together, which is 200 times 300 times 200, which is giving you 600. The tenth together, 50 plus 60, it gives you 111. And then you have 3 plus 8. And that's when you are having to do, you have to do the carry over to make it 10 on the other side. Now at the end of the day, you have 621. And then the other one is descending and ascending order. Sometimes you get this fractions and decimals and fractions, mixed up numbers, and you have to arrange them in descending order or ascending order. Now let's look at the first one, and for example, let's say we want to arrange this one in descending order. This is what you have been given. That is 2 over 3 n 0,5 n 2 3 over 4. So the very first thing that I always tell people is that you have to convert these things to either fractions or decimal numbers. And I think decimal numbers is always the best because you can actually see with your own eyes which one is bigger and smaller. So 2 over 3, if you convert it to decimal number, you get 0,66 recurring. Let's say 0,67. And if this one, it just comes down, is 0,5, we know it. And this one, for us to convert the 2, 3 over 4, we say 2 times 4 is 8 plus 3, and that's 11, 11 over 4. Now 11 over 4, we can simply say 11 divided by 4. And then we have your final answer, which is 2.75. Now, it is now easy for you now to arrange which one is bigger or which one is smaller and so on. So if they ask you to arrange this in, for example, descending order, in other words, it starts from the biggest one to the smallest one. It's descending. Then you can say this will be your number 1, 2,75, and between 0,5 and 0,6 is which one is bigger? We know that this one is bigger, so it will be your number 2. And 0,5 will be your number 3. That is now your descending order. Now when you come to if the question was, for example, arrange them in ascending order, then it will be the other way around. So this one will be our number 1, and this one will be our number 2, and then this one will be our number 3 for ascending order. So that's what you just have to take care of. You have to first write them as decimals so that you can be able to see them easily, and so on. Now, let's look at the next one. The next one is 0,6, 1.2, and negative 0,6. Now, if, say, for example, they ask you to arrange these ones in ascending order. In other words, you start from the biggest one to the small one. So we know that 1,2 will be the biggest one, and then it will be followed by 0,6. And the negative numbers usually are the lowest, so this will be our number 3, sorry. So that is how you do the arrangement. First, you take them to a unit that you can do it easily and so on. And then there is this is a similar thing when you have to, for example, the 6 over 7, and then you have to put a symbol, whether it's bigger or smaller than 0,2. So what you do here is first you convert them all to decimals, and then after that you can see whether you can put a bigger or smaller or equal to sign. Now, finding the formula of the nth term, let's look at this one. We have an nth term that says 1, 4, 7, 10. Now, how do we get the nth term? Actually, for us to get the nth term, we say the 3 times tables has the formula 3n, and the terms of this sequence are 2 less than the terms in the 3 times table, so that the formula can be 3. So your formula here, you have 3n minus 2. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you want to find the first term, you say 3, in the place of n, you put a 1 minus 2, and that gives you 3 times 1 is 3 minus 2 is 1. So if you get to the next one, you put a 2, and then you say 3 times 2 is 6 minus 2 is 4. And then the other one, you say you put a 3 there, minus 2, and then you say 3 times 3 is 9, minus 2 is 7. And then the other one, you put a 4 minus 2, and that is equal to 3 times 4 is 12, minus 2 is 10. So now when you look at this column here, you can see that that is what is given to you in that formula. The 10th is 1, 4, 7, 10, and that is how you get your nth term. Now, for example, if you get this one, the next one is saying 3, 9, 27, and 81. Now they are asking you, please give us the formula for the nth term. What do? Here is the term. So what we are saying is 3 is equal to 3 over 1. 9 is equal to 3 over 2. 27 is 3, not 3 over, but 3 to the power 1, 3 to the power 2. 27 is 3 to the power 3. 81 is 3 to the power 4. So what will be your nth term? Simply, your nth term will be 3 to the power n. That's your nth term. 3 to the power n. Now, in other words, if you want to find the first one, you just say 3 over 1, and that gives you 3. 3 to the power 2, it gives you 6. And it goes, not 6, 9, it gives you 9. And it goes on like that as we just have calculated this. So those are the things that you need to know also. And then you need to know how to convert fractions to decimal fractions. Converting, for example, you have 3 over 4, and you have to convert it to fractions. So you say 3 divided by 4, and you get it as a fraction. And then you also have to know when it is a decimal number. Now you have to write it in a fraction. And decimal to fractions is there. I explain it there, 1,75. You make it 175 over 100, and then it becomes 75 over 10, and then it becomes 15 over 2, and then it becomes 7 over 2, 7 and a half. Now, that is what we're supposed to do. Now, the next slide, which is not... The next slide is calculate the following, showing all your works. So here we have 50 cents plus 450 minus $90. So what we do here is that the best thing that you can do here is to write these things under each other, so that you can be able to do the calculation. But the first one is very easy because it's all money and it's all in dollars. So it's 50 cents plus 455.50 cents and $90. So you just add them. When you add, you get an answer in that. But when you look at number 2, it's 100 meters plus 1,000 centimeter plus 1,5 kilometers. And you notice that all of them, none of them are in any one unit. But when you look at the answer, they are requesting the answer to be in meters. So what you do is you take your 100 meters and your 1,000 centimeter, you convert it to meters, because you want everything to be in meters. So for 1,000, you divide it by 100. That means it gives you a 10 meters. And plus your kilometers is now 1,5 kilometers. You also have to convert your kilometers to meters, so that you can have everything in meters. So once you have everything in meters, then you can add 100 meters plus 10 meters plus 1,500 meters. It gives you the final answer, because your answer must be in meters. And it's the same with the next one, which is 40 liter plus 500 milliliters minus 5,000 cubic centimeters. So for this one, they want your answer in cubic centimeter. And we know that cubic centimeter and milliliter are similar, which means that there is no conversion. All what you need to convert here is that you convert your liters to cubic centimeter, and you convert your milliliters into cubic centimeter, and then you add for you to get the final answer. The same with this one. Also is one of the issues that give us also sometimes difficulty. You have 3 hours 20 minutes plus 1,5 days plus 22 hours 40 minutes. So what you do here, you first convert everything to a unit that you think you are comfortable in working with. So for example, it will be 2 hours, and then the days you convert it to hours. It will be 24 hours, 24 and a half. That means is 24 plus 12 hours. And then the other one will be 22 hours. So you first add all the hours together, and then you go over to the minutes. You add 20 minutes plus the 40 minutes, and then you get your final answer. And then there is the issue of analogs, and this is now towards the end of our section. What we are saying here is that you need to know how to draw the following clocks. For example, if a clock is 13:15, now you have to draw a clock. All what you do in the examination is you first draw a circle and you put those 4 crosses there, and then you put 2 in between each one of them, and that is your clock. So this one will be your 12, this will be your 6, this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is 9. So now when they are saying draw a clock which is showing a time of 1:15. So 1:15, your long stick will be here, and your short stick, because here is 1, it will be showing towards 1, but it will not be right over 1, it will be somewhere after 1 there, because it's quarter past. So that is one of the tricks that you also should learn and know, that this is how you should draw it. Now the next one is 15:15, so you can also draw that one. The other one is also 3:15, and the other one is 12 o'clock. For example, if you have to draw the one of 12 o'clock, very simple. You just draw your clocks the same way I was showing you, and then your long stick will show at 12, and your short stick will also show at 12. That means that is 12 o'clock. That is what you should teach your learners. Then the other last thing that we need to discuss is the properties. You need to know the properties of the following shapes. For example, a cone, a kite, a rectangle. All these properties are very well explained in your study guide. So you need to know how to draw it. You need to know the properties. And you also need to know, for example, if there is questions that are asked for you to differentiate, and you must know also how to draw all these shapes in your book. Sometimes they can ask you to draw a cone or a kite and write the properties. So you must be able to know all those ones. Now the final words, if you are having difficulty of things that you don't understand, please call me between 5 and 8 in the afternoon, weekdays only. Use your assignment and this presentation to prepare for your examination. So take this presentation and your assignment that you have done already and try to use it to prepare for your examination. The length of your answer should match the number of marks. Don't write a long story but it's only 2 marks that is asked, or a short story but it's 10 marks that is asked. So you must measure your mark or your writing towards your mark. And then start preparing for examination in advance. Write as neatly as possible. I wish you all the best. Thank you.